There's only one thing worse than a slut. Boom.
Ideology.
No. Boy, oh boy, I sure hope this new filming setup works out. Hello, it has been a little bit, and I am no longer filming in front of my bookshelves because I moved and they're in a spot now that makes it like really kind of awkward and just like not aesthetically pleasing for me to film in front of them, so you get my desk instead. First of all, I'm sorry for the avalanche of big, fat, meanie, feminazi shit that I've been posting on this channel recently. I'm on my bullshit right now, so you could either take it or you could leave. But anyway, I wanted to make a response video because the video that I get comments on most often, and frankly, the first video that I put on my channel that got like a decent amount of viewership was my I Read Rebel by Rahaf Mohammed video. I actually had no clue that this person is such a contentious figure, but she is apparently. They were all too similar of reactions for me not to feel like something kind of interesting was going on, and so I kind of wanted to talk about it. I wanted to kind of talk about people's reactions to that video, and to Rahaf Mohammed in general. So if you don't know and you haven't seen that video, it might just be easier to just watch the Rahaf Mohammed video and then come here, but basically, Rahaf Mohammed is this Saudi Arabian teenager. Now she's in her 20s, and she was from a well-off Saudi Arabian family who was quite abusive, and she escaped from her abusive family and from Saudi Arabia in, I think, God, 20-something. It was somewhat recently. And so she wrote this book, Rebel, to basically talk about her experiences and what it was like living as a bisexual woman in Saudi Arabia, the ways that she was abused by her family, the way her sisters were abused. Really horrific, horrifying things. Like, there were several descriptions of physical abuse where I thought to myself she could have died from that. One of her sisters was assaulted by their father, and to basically keep her quiet, they kind of made her brain dead. Psychoactive medications, like psychiatric meds, have chemically lobotomized her, for lack of a better term, to make it so that she could never speak out against their powerful father. Now Rahaf is living in Canada and she's doing swell, and people, you know, she's free basically. And people have been commenting on this video, mostly men, but I think there have been some women too, saying things like, oh, like, you know, I get that Saudi Arabia is bad to women, but she's really abusing her freedom. Oh, she's a single mom and she had to give up the child to Child Protective Services. Like, or, oh, like, she's a single mom and she has an OnlyFans now and blah, blah, blah. Like what kind of freedom is that? Blah, blah, blah. You know, just making comments about the really like Instagram baddie kind of makeup that she wears, and the long nails with the little glittery things on them, and you know, all of that. Taking pictures of herself in swimsuits and smoking pot and drinking alcohol, and being basically an open atheist. And people are like, well, what kind of freedom is that? And I'm like, freedom? Like, freedom is freedom. I mean, we live in such puritanical times. People have this idea that, like, you should only be able to have freedom if you do exactly what they want you to do with their freedom. But that's not what freedom is. Men specifically will do this thing where they're like, well, of course I want women to have rights, but only if they only use those rights in the ways that I specifically deem appropriate and moral and right and pure. And it's like, well, then we don't have rights. You know, like, oh, like, I want women to have abortion rights, but, you know, that woman over there, she took it too far. Part of having freedom and liberty is to be able to make choices that other people deem immoral. And what I kind of personally see in Rahaf is, I mean, I see her as kind of an example of the way that repressive regimes, like Saudi Arabia, regimes which hinder women's freedom, really hinder their development as persons. And so people kind of see Rahaf Mohammed making these like immoral, irresponsible decisions at her age, in her early 20s, and they go, like she must have been a bad seed and blah blah blah. To me, what it looks like is somebody who wasn't allowed to develop at the normal kind of timeline that people develop when they're living in a free society. And so now she's kind of in this like teenager phase where she's doing these somewhat irresponsible things, and that's just how people develop. Like, she literally was set back in her development. Like, if she had been born in Canada, she would have gone through all of this shit when she was 15, 16. But the regime she lived under was so repressive and so effective at stunting her development that only now that she actually has a little bit of freedom to do as she pleased is she free to kind of test the limits of just her power as a human being. Yeah, like part of that is doing things that other people deem irresponsible. Like part of it is being irresponsible on purpose. I mean, personally, I think that it's kind of a regular part of human development to just like go through your I'm gonna be bad now phase, and that's just part of how you learn to become like a well-rounded person. I mean, there are just so many other factors that fall into it too. I mean, why is no one questioning why she wasn't given more help when she arrived in the country and had to make an OnlyFans, which I actually don't think she does like explicit like porn or anything like that on. I think it's just for like people to ask her questions or like say like, oh, try this Western candy or something like that. I don't know. Maybe she's changed it since I last looked at it, but I did literally look this up to see if it was part of the smear campaign against her. She also has a really big smear campaign against her by the Saudi government because her family were so powerful and they really, really don't want the country to look bad. Like, they really don't like her or other people talking about this, which is part of why I'm making this video. What I'm talking about and what Jean Lanier is talking about when they talk about ideology sluts is, which I think is a hilarious term, even though it's a little problematic. What they're talking about is people who like think they belong to one ideology, but they actually kind of are accidentally slipping into another ideology, and they can't help it because they're such a slut.
And especially at that time, there was this hyper-libertarianism that was supposed to be guiding everything. And I wanted to point out to people that sometimes I used to call them ideology sluts. That you think you're you're adhering to this one ideology, but you're actually slipping into this other one because you're such a slut. And that had happened in Silicon Valley, and that we'd moved from this supposed free thinking thing into this technocratic way of enforcing same thinking.
So an ideology slut, like the example that I use is the guy who says like, oh yeah, like, you know, I'm like pro-liberty, I love free speech, like, you know, I want women to have rights, man, like, I'm such a progressive, and then he goes and says, oh, but women shouldn't use their rights like that. Like, actually, they should do what I say if they want to have rights. Is like, you're calling yourself this, like, progressive, like, liberal, or maybe libertarian kind of guy, but actually you're slipping into just straight up, like, traditional, like, Republican, conservative, like, women should get their rights through pleasing men and doing whatever men say. You know, you're a slut. You're an ideology slut. If that guy is you, you're a slut. You know, at some point we're just going to have to recognize women's humanity and, like, Rahaf Mohammed's humanity. My God, if that was you, wouldn't the first thing you did when you arrived in your new free country be smoke a blunt and go have sex? I'm serious, because I really want to know what you would do. Would you really go to church and pray after you had been terrorized by religion your whole life? If your family had beat you within an inch of your life and chemically lobotomized your sister, and if you had been raped, and if you had literally had to make the gut-wrenching choice between being completely alone in a place where you don't speak the language and it's cold and it's a weird environment and you've never seen it before, and having freedom, and getting to be with your family but getting abused and literally fucking psychologically tortured every single day. Like, if you had to make that choice, would the first thing you did after being terrorized by religion in that way, would the first thing you do really be go to church? No, it wouldn't. Stop holding women to these fucking impossible ass standards. Like, she's a fucking person. Yes, she wanted a blunt after all that. Yeah, she wanted a glass of wine, and yes, she wanted to have sex and experience human connection. Oh, but what about the child? What about the child? Oh my god. It's just, to me, it seems stupid. It's like someone has been through the ringer and you still expect them to be a perfect angel. I understand that people are like, oh, but it impacts another person and blah, 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 blah. If she aborted it, y'all would still hate her. Like, you would hate her no matter what she did. I think it's ridiculous, the standards that people hold this woman to. I mean, she is figuring it the fuck out. Her growth and development was massively stunted by this scary ass country that she grew up in. And she doesn't have any help with it. But, you know, she's got people who want her dead for smoking a fucking blunt. Which I admit, like, you know, I sometimes want my neighbors dead when they are blazing it up for the 7th day in a row, with the absolute worst fucking skunk weed I have ever smelled in my entire life. I get it, you know, wanting someone dead because of a blunt, but don't you have, like, a job that you need to go and do? Like, don't you have a job or a life or something? I don't know. Anyway, like, you're not a progressive if you are literally like, Rahaf Mohammed is a bad person for literally risking her life to escape to a free country and then using her freedom in that free country. Yeah. Anyway, that's it for this video. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed, even though I was just yelling at you this entire time. That's it. Bye.